Fox News host Tucker Carlson aligned himself with Bernie Sanders and on income inequality. Now, this is going to be a masterclass in propaganda. I am really going to break down here what Tucker Carlson communicated in his segment and how he is going to try and use this issue to try and bring viewers into his worldview on conservative policy and other issues, and really ultimately on white supremacy. But let me start off with Carlson here, who actually correctly identifies the problem in America.
Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon, is worth about $150 billion. That's enough to make him the richest man in the world by far, and possibly the richest human being in all of human history. It's certainly enough to pay his employees well, but he doesn't. A huge number of Amazon workers are so poorly paid, they qualify for federal welfare benefits. According to data from the nonprofit group New Food Economy, nearly 1 in 3 Amazon employees in Arizona, for example, was on food stamps last year. Jeff Bezos isn't paying his workers enough to eat, so you made up the difference with your tax dollars. Next time you see Jeff Bezos, make certain that he says thank you. What about the Walton family? They founded Walmart. Collectively, they're worth about $175 billion. That's more than the entire gross domestic product of Qatar, the oil-rich Gulf state. The Waltons could certainly afford to be generous with their workers. Instead, they count on you to take up the slack. In 2013, taxpayers sent more than $6 billion to Walmart's employees for food stamps, Medicaid, and housing assistance. And if you think that's remarkable, meet Travis Kalanick. He's the youthful founder of Uber. His personal fortune is close to $5 billion. His drivers, by contrast, often make less than minimum wage. One recent study found that many Uber drivers lose money working for the company. That's not a sustainable business model. The only reason it continues is because of your generosity. Because you're paying the welfare benefits for Uber's impoverished drivers, child billionaires like Travis get to keep buying bigger houses and more airplanes. He's someone else who owes you a thank you note. If you can think of a less fair system than this, send us an email. We'd love to hear about it. This system is indefensible.
So that was actually fairly spot on. Now, Carlson here pinpoints that billionaires are not paying their workers enough to live, and because of that, their workers have to live off the system, meaning that taxpayers are essentially subsidizing for their employees, whether it's food stamps or welfare. So that's a strong argument. And it's also, I mean, that's really the conservative argument. So Fox News always does this. They'll use the argument that gets their viewers the most angry. So thinking that you're being stolen from is going to anger their Fox News viewers more than if Tucker Carlson said, well, if you work 40 hours a week, shouldn't you get paid a living wage? I mean, that's the moral argument. You should also be able to make the moral argument here that if you work a full-time job, you should make enough money to live. But whatever. Carlson still makes the argument here that these billionaires should be paying their employees enough. But now that he's reeled you in by correctly identifying what the issue is, he's now going to spring on you what his solution is, or what he sees as the real problem here. Watch.
This system is indefensible, and yet almost nobody ever complains about it. How come? Well, conservatives like us support the free market, and for good reason. The free market works. But there's nothing free about this market. A lot of these companies operate as monopolies. They hate markets. They use government regulation to crush competition. There's nothing conservative about that, just as there's nothing conservative about most big corporations. Just the opposite. They are the backbone of the left. Pick a left-wing cause that you think is hurting the country. Check the donor list, and you'll find the name of some corporation, often many corporations. Corporate America enables the progressive lunacy you see every night on this show. They are funding the revolution now in progress. That's exactly why liberals say nothing as oligarchs amass billions by soaking our middle class, because they've been paid off.
All right. Here's where the propaganda starts. So after correctly identifying the problem, Tucker Carlson now goes and blames, well, it's regulation. It's regulation. If it was a free market, then these companies would pay their employees properly. So let me actually break down some of these quotes. So the first quote here I want to touch on: the free market works, but there's nothing free about this market. A lot of these companies operate as monopolies. They use government regulation to crush competition. Now, the average Fox News viewer will be fooled by this. They'll think, yeah, it's because of regulation. These companies are using government regulation to form these monopolies and not pay their employees properly. But that's just not true. This is able to happen. Jeff Bezos is able to be a $150 billionaire because of the lack of regulation. Amazon doesn't pay their employees properly because they aren't forced to. That's the issue here. So this is nothing about a free market. If the market was more free than it already is, Amazon employees would be paid even less than they are now. So what this really deals with here is antitrust law. So for those that don't know, let me just define here what antitrust law is. U.S. antitrust law is a collection of federal and state government laws that regulates the conduct and organization of business corporations, generally to promote fair competition for the benefit of consumers. The concept is called competition law in other English-speaking countries. The main statutes are the Sherman Act of 1890, the Clayton Act of 1914, and the Federal Trade Commission Act of 1914. These acts first restrict the formation of cartels and prohibit other collusive practices regarded as being in restraint of trade. Second, they restrict the mergers and acquisitions of organizations that could substantially lessen competition. Third, they prohibit the creation of a monopoly and the abuse of monopoly power. So, antitrust law is a form of regulation. When enforced properly, it's supposed to protect against monopolies, as one example. So, regulation is the enemy of people like Jeff Bezos, of Amazon. It is the enemy of billionaires, of large corporations, of monopolies. Regulation is good. Regulation protects the average person. So, a free market would not have protected against this. Again, a more free market would have made the situation even worse than it currently is. Now, the FTC is one example here that generally deals with mergers and is supposed to push forward antitrust law. So, the essential goal of antitrust regulations is to protect consumers from predatory business practices driven by companies that hold outsized market power. While companies can grow market power over time, think a fast-growing startup eating more and more market share, the reality is that the U.S. government, by and large, avoids using antitrust to target a company in the normal operation of its business, Microsoft back in the 1990s being a notable exception. Instead, the FTC and the Department of Justice directs its attention to mergers and acquisitions as key decision points where it can review a transaction and determine whether the combined company helps or hurts competition. Companies conducting transactions must submit documentation to antitrust bodies as part of what is known as the HSR process. So, bottom line here, Tucker Carlson is being disingenuous when he claims that regulation is the problem. No, antitrust regulation doesn't do enough. Now, the next quote here, let me touch on from Carlson. Most corporations are the backbone of the left. Now, this depends on what he means by the left. If he's talking about the Democratic Party that takes in big donor money, correct. Big donor money is a backbone of the Democratic Party. But it's also the backbone of the Republican Party. So we're talking big pharma, Wall Street, fossil fuel money. These industries back these parties. That's the problem. Both of these parties have sold out to corporate America. So the idea that somehow the corporations are a left issue or a Democratic Party issue is just completely absurd. Now, if he's talking about left as in socialism, that's antithetical to socialism. So, look, socialism looks to completely dismantle capitalism. Socialism is the enemy of Jeff Bezos, is the enemy of any billionaire in the US, because they have been able to make their money in this capitalist system. If this was a socialist system, they would not be billionaires. So the problem is not the left. The problem is the right. capitalism is a right-wing issue. Now, again, unfortunately, a lot of viewers don't know that. A lot of Fox News viewers are going to see this, are going to eat it up and think, oh, Tucker Carlson has got it. It's regulation's the problem. The left wing. Socialism is creating all these billionaires. What? It's just a complete fact-free environment. All of Fox News is like this. Now, let me get to the next quote here. This one's fun. That's why liberals say nothing as oligarchs amass billions by soaking our middle class, because they've been paid off. Again, what do you mean by liberals? So if you're talking about the Democratic Party, yeah, a lot of them have been paid off, just as the Republican Party has been paid off. But if you're talking about, I don't know, commentators, well, let's get into it. So, yes, prominent liberals like Fox News contributor Ben Shapiro. Oh, yes, he's definitely paid off. And he's also definitely not a liberal. So here is just a little glimpse at Ben Shapiro and his incredible donor base. And if you get a little closer, this is all reporting from TYT. Get a little closer, you see some the billionaire Mercers here. So billionaires feeding him. You got the Wilkes brothers feeding him. And of course, you've also got a couple of Koch brothers sprinkled in there too, because, it's conservatives. So this is the problem here. The right wing is run on billionaire money. And what kind of coverage does that buy you when these billionaires put all this money into Ben Shapiro? It gets you commentary like this.
Okay, let's be real about this. The people who need the tax cuts the most in order to generate wealth in the economy are the people who are paying the taxes. That is disproportionately people at the top. It is very hard to give tax relief to people who are paying very little in taxes. I've done this tax breakdown before, so I don't see the need to do it again. But bottom line is that if you're in the lowest quintile of income earners in the United States, you're essentially paying zero taxes. When it comes to net taxes in the United States, meaning the benefits you get back from government, basically the only people paying taxes in the United States, net taxes in the United States, are people in the top 10% of income earners. Those are the people who are actually generating the jobs.
Oh yeah, that's what it gets you. This is why billionaires shower Shapiro with money. He'll go out and say shit like this, that the tax cuts, people at the top, they need tax cuts the most. Now, if you're just the average viewer, you're not in the top, 1% of the country, isn't that kind of bothersome that Shapiro thinks you aren't paying enough in taxes, but people at the top, someone like Jeff Bezos, who has $150 billion, more money than anybody can even imagine. What do you do with $1 billion, let alone $150 billion? It's nuts. So the actual issue here isn't that the people at the top are paying too much in taxes. It's that they are not paying enough in taxes. But billionaires will go out there and pay people like Ben Shapiro to spread this propaganda and indoctrinate the youth. Now, let me get to the last clip of Tucker Carlson here, where he cozies up to Bernie Sanders.
There is one person in Washington who is offended by this arrangement, and we're sorry to say he's wrong on pretty much everything else. But this is a weird moment in American politics, so you take allies where you can find them. Bernie Sanders, of all people, is trying to get your money back from Jeff Bezos. This is especially amazing since Bezos is on Bernie's side on most things. They're both left-wing activists. But on this question, Bernie is right. He's planning legislation that would force big corporations to return the taxpayer-funded welfare benefits you have paid to their workers. It's not a perfect solution, and it's unlikely to pass. No matter what they may say in public, liberals in Congress would never support something like that. Their loyalty is not to you, it's to Uber and Jeff Bezos and the rest. But at the very least, legislation like this might awaken a sleepy population to the new reality of activist corporate America. And that's a good thing. It's shocking, so shocking that I recently wrote a book about it. It's called Ship of Fools, and it explained what happened, who did it, and why.
This is just so good. This is very smart of Tucker Carlson, because he knows that Bernie Sanders is the most popular politician in the country. So instead of fighting that, he pretends to actually be on Bernie's side. Or no, in this case, Bernie's on his side, because Bernie Sanders of all people is right on this. Yeah, Bernie Sanders of all people, who have been talking about this issue since the 1980s. Here's a clip.
What kind of a person would you like to see as President of the United States?
Well, I would like to see somebody who has the guts to begin to stand up to the people who own this country, to recognize that in our nation today we have an extreme disparity between the rich and the poor, that elections are bought and sold and controlled by people who have huge sums of money. So my first concern is to have a president who has the courage to look reality in the face and say that we need some radical changes in this country so that every American can have the opportunity to have a decent standard of living and live a decent life.
Bernie Sanders of all people, who would have thought? Unbelievable. Tucker Carlson is really something else. So, Bernie Sanders. Now, how has he actually decided to fight Amazon on this? What is he doing? You know what he's doing? Exactly what Tucker Carlson is saying is not the answer. Pushing for more regulation of these large corporations. Watch.
The working families and middle class of this country should not have to subsidize the wealthiest people in the United States of America. That's absurd. And that is what a rigged economy is all about. The fact is that if employers in this country simply paid workers a living wage, taxpayers would save about $150 billion a year on federal assistance programs, and millions of workers would be able to live in dignity and security. Frankly, I don't believe that ordinary Americans should be subsidizing the wealthiest people in the world because they pay their employees inadequate wages. That is why I am introducing legislation on September 5th to demand that Mr. Bezos, the Walton family of Walmart, and other billionaires get off of welfare and start paying their employees a living wage. Our legislation gives large, profitable employers a choice. Pay workers a living wage or pay for the public assistance programs your low-wage workers are forced to rely upon. The greed of the billionaire class is having an horrendous impact upon our economy and the moral fabric of this country. Together, we are going to change that. Thank you.
So, what's Bernie's solution? Less regulation? More free market? No. The solution is you actually have to force these companies to pay their employees a proper wage, or at the very least, pay for the public assistance programs that their employees are using. That's how you solve this problem. So, while Tucker Carlson pretends to be on Bernie Sanders' side here, he's not. Carlson is just using Bernie's message to try and sell his own book and get people on his side on other issues. So, look, anybody that is trying to praise Tucker Carlson here should not be doing that. Carlson is simply trying to trick people into bringing them onto his side on other issues. That's all this is about. Now, someone like me, I actually criticize neoliberals like Hillary Clinton or the Democratic Party, and I criticize their addiction to big money. Does Tucker Carlson do that with Republicans? With Fox News that he works for? No. Tucker Carlson is a fraud. And in fact, it's even worse than that. So Carlson really wants to bring you into his world. And what is his world all about? Check out these headlines. Watch how Fox News rising star Tucker Carlson is winning over white supremacist America. Neo-Nazis and white nationalists adore watching Megyn Kelly's primetime replacement Tucker Carlson humiliate liberals, and especially Jews. Oh, you think this is all just a crazy headline, right? No, Carlson doesn't do that. Here's a headline from David Duke's website, the Grand Wizard of the KKK. Dr. Duke and Stryker, hero Tucker Carlson, lambasted for exposing white ethnic cleansing in America and strange coincidence of pro-Israel and pro-anti-white genocide in South Africa. Hero Tucker Carlson, from the Grand Wizard of the KKK, David Duke. Tucker Carlson is using a correct criticism of capitalism, masking it as not being a criticism of capitalism, cozying up to the most popular politician in the country, Bernie Sanders, adopting that message of income inequality, and bringing it all together and using that to bring people into his disgusting worldview. That's who Tucker Carlson is. So don't sit here and think that Carlson is becoming woke and waking up to the problems with capitalism. That's not what's going on here. All Carlson has done is identify what is popular and has co-opted that message for his own disgusting message. That's all Carlson is about. He's a disgusting Fox News host, and he's using a real problem of income inequality to trick people into having his shitty worldview. Hey, if you enjoyed this video, hit that subscribe button below and consider becoming a patron at therationalnational.com/join. You get some extra content, but also, most importantly, you help support me in continuing to produce these sorts of videos.